Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight will be part 4 in an ongoing series of my true crime book recommendations. So if you missed parts 1, 2, or 3, go back and check them out so you're all caught up. Now, part 4 of my true crime book recommendations. Let's go ahead and find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. The first book tonight in my true crime book recommendations is Unabomber, How the FBI Broke Its Own Rules to Capture the Terrorist, Ted Kaczynski. And this was written by 3 agents who worked the case. Jim Freeman, who was the special agent in charge, Terry Turchi, who was the assistant special agent in charge, Unabomber Task Force, and then Donald Max Knoll, the supervisory special agent, Unabomber Task Force. This book is amazing because not only does it give an insight into Ted Kaczynski, but it gives an insight into the agents who helped take him down. In fact, one of these agents, I don't want to spoil it, was the one who actually put the handcuffs on Ted Kaczynski when he was arrested. The parts in this that I personally found the most fascinating was when the FBI was struggling with what to do when the Unabomber wanted his manifesto publicized. And do they do it? Do they not? Because you're giving power to the criminal or the offender. And they go through all of that and all of this decision-making steps along the way. So you see how the FBI handled this. And it's just an incredible, incredible read. I can't recommend it enough. And again, it's by the FBI agents who worked the case. So you don't get any more of an inside look than you would with this book. So definitely check it out. Unabomber, How the FBI Broke Its Own Rules to Capture the Terrorist, Ted Kaczynski. Now, the second book in tonight's true crime book recommendations is Fiend, The Shocking True Story of America's Youngest Serial Killer. And this is by author that I have all of his books, Harold Schechter. So Fiend is about 14-year-old Jesse Pomeroy. And for those who don't know, I'll just read quickly from the back. He was arrested in 1874 in Boston because there were a lot of murders that were happening to young children in that area. And it turns out it was Jesse Pomeroy who was the one that was committing it. I actually covered Jesse Pomeroy earlier on in my show. So if you're interested in learning more about him, go back and check out that episode because I do cover that. But Harold Schechter, all of his books do a incredible deep dive into the cases that he covers. This is no exception. And of course, being from Boston, I totally appreciated this book because he doesn't just go into Jesse and Jesse's crimes. He lays out what the area was like and what the area was like at the time of the crimes. So you get a feel for it. Because again, I was not around in 1874, so I don't know what the city of Boston was like at that time. But reading this, I can totally picture it. I get it, and it's a fascinating read. I know sometimes crimes involving children are a little touchy for some people, and I get that, especially when it's a child who is committing the murders. But don't write this off your list because of that, because Harold does a great job in going into the mind of Jesse Pomeroy and then what happened to him after the trial and after he was convicted. So check this out, Fiend, The Shocking True Story of America's Youngest Serial Killer by Harold Schechter. The third book in tonight's book recommendations video is The Encyclopedia of the Ted Bundy Murders, and this is by Kevin Sullivan. This is a small, short book. It's only about 240 pages, and it doesn't read like a traditional book. It's exactly what it says, an encyclopedia. So it goes through not only every victim that Ted Bundy had killed that we know of, because I'm sure there are many unsolved ones that he's connected to that we just haven't made those connections. It also goes through names of those who worked the cases and all of the states that Bundy had committed his crimes in. It goes through those who were part of his trial, his lawyers. Again, he had several different trials, so there were several different lawyers. This is more of, I would say, a quick reference book. If you're wanting to learn about the Bundy case and you're like, okay, wait a minute, I know he committed some murders at the Chi Omega sorority house. You can kind of flip through and read about those particular victims if that's what you want to do. But so I would recommend this for anybody who's interested in the Ted Bundy murders, because Kevin does a great job of just putting everybody into one book. So I read it through as is because that's just how I read, but it's even better if you're just kind of quickly trying to reference somebody during a particular time in the Bundy murder. So I would definitely recommend you checking this out, the Encyclopedia of the Ted Bundy Murders by Kevin Sullivan. The next book that I'm recommending in tonight's true crime book recommendations is Ted Bundy, The Yearly Journal, Volume 1 by Kevin Sullivan. You're going to see a lot of Kevin Sullivan book recommendations in the next few months because I got quite a few for Christmas and I am quickly working through those. So this book in particular, what Kevin wanted to do, and I'll just read on the back what he said because he captures it perfectly, is this first offering, Ted Bundy, The Yearly Journal, Volume 1, contains a great deal of never before published information from a number of women who barely escaped his grasp. It also reveals Bundy's geographic hunting pattern after his arrival in Salt Lake City, Utah in September 1974. A surprising discovery the author never expected to make, but did, and it all came through the valid testimonies of the women he encountered during this period. So this book gives, again, a great, as it says, kind of tracking of Bundy and his crimes. And there are some reports in here for some women that Kevin believes may have encountered Bundy along the way, and he lets them, in their own words, tell their story. Again, and he even says, for you to believe, or, could it have been Bundy that they encountered? Maybe, maybe not. But he puts these in here. One thing that I really like in this book is, and it's tough to read, is the transcript of the biographical memorial of Kathy Parks. And that, for those who don't know, Kathy Parks was one of the victims, and her grandfather wrote a beautiful biographical memorial about her. And it's multiple pages, and, Kevin starts to go through a little bit of what it is, and then actually gives a whole chapter devoted to her grandfather's memorial. And this was before Bundy was caught. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're reading it. But the grandfather's connecting that there's other women that went missing, and he writes about them in his memorial, that this can't just be his granddaughter is the only victim in this. And it's heartbreaking because it's a grandfather mourning the loss of his granddaughter who was brutally murdered, and there's no answers yet. So that was the part out of this book that I found the most touching out of everything. But the whole thing itself is a fascinating read. So again, check this out. Ted Bundy, The Yearly Journal, Volume 1 from Kevin Sullivan. The fifth and final book in tonight's true crime book recommendations is Freak Out, My Life with Frank Zappa by Pauline Butcher. Now, this is not a traditional true crime book. I get it. I got it. The reason I included this in here was, and if you don't follow me over on the podcast, I'm, again, one of the Manson Saga discussion panel co-hosts. We had the pleasure and honor to interview Pauline Butcher, the author of this book, in her time with Frank Zappa in Laurel Canyon from 1968 to 1971. The reason I'm including this in here is because it does make reference to the Manson murders very briefly, but it also connects to some of the incidents that occurred up at the canyon. One in particular, and I won't spoil it if you don't know, a gentleman who came in with a gun and basically threatened Frank Zappa while Pauline and other family members were there. So I connect that with being part of true crime very lightly. So that's why I'm adding this in here. But if you're not into true crime, this is still an amazing book. If you're not into Frank Zappa, This is just an amazing book. When we interviewed Pauline, I told her this was a book that not only if you're into Frank Zappa or not into, again, there's a little bit of a tie to the Manson case. It's a great story about a girl just moving to the United States and finding her way. And I really liked that. So you could, again, check out the interview we did with Pauline if you want to learn more about that, because we discussed this book and some great questions that came out of this book. But again, so I am recommending this. Again, not a typical true crime book, but it references some crime. So that's why I'm putting it in here. And it's an amazing read. So check it out. Freak Out, My Life with Frank Zappa by Pauline Butcher. So that is the part 4 of true crime book recommendations that I have to suggest. Thank you for sticking around for this episode. Do you have any questions about any of these books? Or even better, do you have any book recommendations for me? Leave it in the comments below. Let's be interactive and let's chat about it. I will say that after the holidays, I did get several books, like double-digit books for Christmas. Some of them being some of the recommendations that you guys have said. So I'm really looking forward to checking those out. Finally, do you have any suggestions for any upcoming true crime cases you'd like me to cover? Well, leave it down below. You may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.